Today we have a new bracket system. There's a lot that comes with it. There's a lot of things that are scary, but me and Nate are really excited about the bracket system, the game changers, and like kind of how this is going to establish the format to be more inclusive. So we're going to discover that today a little bit. Nate, take us away. Like, what's just happened? What has Wizards announced?
Yeah, so we now have the bracket system, at least a beta version of the bracket system. This is not a set in stone thing, just for people that are, maybe watching this. This is not 100% down packed yet. This is obviously new. This is new for all of us. And this is going to be an interesting thing to go over. Yeah, we just obviously got the announcement today. There wasn't really too much talks about any bans or unbans or anything like that from this announcement that we had. But they did say that some unbans might be coming down the pipeline towards the end of April, and they might be put into this new list. So this new list that we have is known as the Game Changers. So essentially what they talked about while they were on this stream with Gavin Verhey is that these Game Changers are kind of these cards that they put onto this list to essentially say, like, these are game-changing cards. These are cards that when they are down, the game can kind of warp around seeing it, whether it's being casted, whether it's a permanent on the board. And it's really interesting looking at these because some of this stuff is things that we've brought up before, things that we've talked about in older videos when we kind of did our discussion of what's cEDH, what's EDH.
Yep.
And we're just going to kind of go over some of these, talk about the bracket system a little bit. Yeah, see what our thoughts are and what we want to talk about on them.
In the Game Changers, it goes by color. So we're going to go over the first one, white. Drannith Magistrate, Enlightened Tutor, Sarah's Sanctum, Smothering Tithe, and Trouble in Pairs. Nate, what are the cards that stick out to you that are like, okay, this makes sense? And what are these other cards are like, I don't really know about that?
Yeah, sure. As far as what I think absolutely is understandable being there, we're talking Sarah's Sanctum, Smothering Tithe, because Sarah's Sanctum, enchantments are hard to deal with, right? Whether you're in EDH or cEDH, enchantments are tough to deal with. And when you have a land that taps for like a ton of mana, especially when you're in the colors that you're necessary to have, I think Sarah's Sanctum is a perfect example of very powerful land. Smothering Tithe. We've talked about Smothering Tithe in cEDH. It's getting this new name of being the white omniscience, so to speak. And I think that's completely fair. I think it is a very game warping card, especially with all the card draw that's going around. It's hard to pay for, get a ton of mana.
Yeah.
We've talked about tutors. I think it does make a deck very consistent when it has tutors. I don't know if me personally would have a Game Changer as Enlightened Tutor, but maybe I'm a bit biased on that. The one that surprises me a bit, and we talked about this in our Discord a little bit, link in the description, haha. But to stay on track, Trouble in Pairs. So it's a good card draw engine, especially in white. And in cEDH, it does see a little bit of play here and there, but I don't know. I'm just a little bit surprised to see it myself. And then Drannith Magistrate, for us, this is just, you're going to see it. You're going to see it. It doesn't bother us in the slightest. However, in a EDH game, in a high power EDH game, I completely understand Drannith Magistrate being on this list for sure. So blue is next up on the list. Blue, I think, also the longest on this list by like one or two cards. So blue, we have a Cyclonic Rift, Expropriate, Force of Will, Fierce Guardianship, Rhystic Study, Thassa's Oracle, Urza, Lord High Artificer, Mystical Tutor, and Jin-Gitaxias, Core Augur. So, Chris, do you want to take us through blue and kind of what your thoughts are on this list that they have set up?
Well, thank you, Nate. Yes, absolutely.
Of course.
So, really, the difference between like a high power in a cEDH or getting to somewhere that level 4, level 5 is really going to be a lot of these blue cards. Blue is one of the most prominent colors in cEDH, and in EDH, it's the second most used color overall. So really, you look at like Force of Will and Fierce Guardianship and Rhystic Study. Those are going to be the ones that, like, cool, you play these, you are starting an arms race. You are saying, cool, we're your friend. Okay, cool. You Force of Will? Cool. I'll go get one myself. cool. And everyone starts to build. Once you start putting these cards in, you can't stop that ticking time bomb of eventually reaching cEDH. A lot of people do play these blue cards that we talked about at one point in time in EDH, but I really think that these Fierce Guardianships, Force of Will, and Rhystic Study, all of these cards, Jin Gitaxias, that is a broken card. That is an annoying card. I can 100% see that on a lower end, 1 through 3 kind of bracket whenever we get to talking into that. But for cEDH, it's annoying, but you can literally give the game away. So sometimes those kind of cards, you're like, but Thassa's Oracle, once again, one of our most prominent win cons in the entire format. The other ones, obviously, very, very good, but those are the ones that like stick out to me and just say, we're starting an arms race, and where we're going to go, we don't know. So
yeah, and to touch on that for just one quick second, one of the cards that is on this list that you didn't say anything about, and there's actually, again, we'll talk about it more when we talk about the actual bracket system, but Expropriate's on this list. Now, if you cast Expropriate when we're playing cEDH with you, I'm going to say, well, good job for casting that. I believe it's a 9-mana spell to get extra turns. So one of the big things that they talked about in the bracket system was extra turn effects. And so that's a big reason why Expropriate is on this game-changing list that we have. So.
Just play Trouble in Paris. You'll be fine.
Yeah, you'll be good. You'll be totally set in stone. So
the next one that we got, black, right? On the list, we have Bolas' Citadel, Demonic Tutor, Imperial Seal, Opposition Agent, Tergrid. We have Vampiric Tutor and Ad Nauseam. These are all like busted in cEDH outside of maybe Tergrid.
Don't get me wrong, love Bolas' Citadel. I think it's a great piece, especially if you're in the proper colors to take advantage of it. Right, it doesn't end up in every single black list.
Yeah,
it's a bit mana intensive, right? Usually you're trying to cheat it in with like a Goblin Welder or something. But regardless, in a high power game of EDH, I don't know if I would see Bolas' Citadel as like a really good game changing piece personally.
Keurig.
Right. So okay, see, in a Keurig list, it's going to be busted, right? But, in a casual, say a bracket 4 game, your mana costs may be way higher, so this might not be as usable. And the same thing goes with Ad Nauseam, right? I think Ad Nauseam is really, really cEDH slanted. I'm not sure. I think if you've built your deck in order to run Ad Nauseam, chances are to some degree you're running it very, very optimally close to cEDH. At least I would assume you would be. But the rest of these, besides obviously Tergrid, tons of sense, right? Demonic Tutor gets you any single one of these, all these pieces that are on the list. The same with Imperial Seal, right? Very, very efficient tutors. And I think black is mainly there for the tutor capability that it has, which is another thing that we'll talk about when we get to the bracket system. But for the most part, these make sense. Being on this list.
Opposition Agent is one of those ones where it's really good in the higher ends, but not maybe so as good in the lower ends. In cEDH and bracket 4 and 5, we do a lot of searching. Whereas in like 1 through 3 bracket, like I don't think it's as impressive really, but it's food for thought. Kind of same with like Dockside back in the day. Like yes, it's really good in high power, but in EDH, like how many rocks are we really kicking out? It's one of those like it's good, but it's better in a certain one of these brackets actually. You want to hit up red.
Yeah, absolutely. So red, real short and to the point. We have Jessica's Will and we have Underworld Breach. So I guess take it away, Chris. What do you think about these two?
Underworld Breach, right? It is a busted card. You need a lot of these other cards to kind of make it busted. It really makes the Grixis pie really, really good in comparison to like the Esper pie. You can play Underworld Breach in a multitude of other different color combos. As long as you have blue, red, like you're kind of doing some good stuff. Jessica's Will is great. I mean, Ritual plus essentially get cards to use on that Ritual. It's pretty good. In cEDH, people definitely play it down considerably. And once again, in like a lower tier, 1 through 3 kind of thing, like some of those things might be really expensive. You might be able to only cast one of those. But then again, people play lands and things like that where you have unlimited hands. Cool. You have 20 cards in hand. Now I have 20 mana and I get to, I can kind of see from that point of view, it's definitely seen a down tick in cEDH, but in EDH, hey, if you're playing Thought Vessel, you deserve to have this used against you.
To be targeted by the Jessica's Will player.
I mean, sure.
No, 100%, absolutely.
There has to be punishing. But not too much to say. Underworld Breach is essentially a win con, if you will, if you can make infinite mana and brain freeze people to death. Great in Legacy Cube. Green is also teeny tiny, so I got a small teeny tiny one. You get a small teeny tiny
Yeah,
one.
yep.
Green, Survival of the Fittest, Vorinclex, Voice of Hunger, and then Gaia's Cradle. Okay, these ones, besides maybe like Gaia's Cradle, is like, oh, okay. Are there no better green cards out there?
Yeah, so the part that throws me off a little bit, right? In white, you see the Enlightened Tutor. In blue, you see the Mystical Tutor. In black, you see the Vampiric Tutor. Yet in green, we don't see Worldly Tutor. Whether that's because the game changers aren't exactly creature heavy, besides like your Drannith Magistrate and, Boss's Oracle and, a Worldly Tutor up your Vorinclex, right? So it just weirded me out just a little bit to not see Worldly Tutor in this list when you see every other tutor in the other colors. Vorinclex Voice of Hunger, I believe, falls into the category of Mass Land Disruption.
Sure.
Because I believe this is the one that locks your lands, if mistaken. With Gaia's Cradle, completely understandable.
Yeah.
100% understandable. The amount of mana that you can make with Gaia's Cradle is insane, especially if you aren't like on the cEDH side of things and you're making, tokens with white and green and, and you have this thing that makes a token on everybody's upkeep, and then all of a sudden you're tapping your Gaia's Cradle for 13 green mana, right? Even tapping it for 4 in cEDH is insane. It's a very, very powerful piece for sure. Survival of the Fittest being the one that they chose, though, is a little strange to me, but again, it is a consistent tutor, right? You're tutoring for a creature that puts a creature into your hand, which then you can dump that creature to tutor for another creature. And
Eldritch Evolution is like so much better, in my opinion.
Right, you have Finale of Devastation,
yes.
Court of Calling,
yes.
a lot of these like right from the library to battlefield kind of effects. So I'm surprised not to see any of them there. But again, this is beta stuff. This is not in stone game changers. These all might change. So
no love for
moving
green.
On. I know, no love or hate, I guess, for green, if depending on how you look at it. So. Next up, we have multicolor cards. Yeah, these are pretty quick to the point as well. And it's going to be Kinnan, Yuriko, Winota, and Grand Arbiter Augustine IV. Kinnan, I absolutely understand being on this list.
100%.
Kinnan is so difficult to make a tier 3 deck around. He's just so strong on his own. Mana acceleration, a mana outlet for the dump, right? He's insane. Now, Yuriko, I do understand to some degree, but here's why. Commander Ninjutsu is stupid, right? We can all agree that Commander Ninjutsu is broken. It shouldn't be a thing that you should be able to do. So in a game of, your bracket 4, where things aren't really off limits, but you have this commander that never has to be taxed, so you're never paying more mana for your spell, essentially, ever, is pretty broken, at its core. But it's hard to get in with Yuriko, especially nowadays. Right, there's a lot of gummed up board states when it comes to Yuriko. Winota, if you ask me, I wouldn't even put Winota on this list. Now, however, the way that Winota has been built in the past is like turbo creature stacks. If you have that variant, I 1,000% understand Winota, and it can snowball very, very fast if you're set up properly. And then Grand Arbiter Augustine, obviously everybody hates their stuff getting taxed. Nobody likes that, right? Drannith Magistrate's kind of the same way in a sense, right? Where you're essentially getting limited resources and because of him. Again, for me personally, I don't really care about Grand Arbiter, but I do understand the oppressive manner that he has about him. If it's me, probably wouldn't have him on the list. I'd actually probably put like Derevi here or something, because it's another thing that like cheats in from the command zone possibly, but maybe he's just not in the colors to, I don't know personally, but that's kind of my take on it initially.
So yeah, Kinnan, broken. Always recommend Kinnan to like newer players because you can get in at the ground level and work your way up. Really great deck there. Yuriko is one of those decks that like does damage not just to one person, but to 3 people, right? Winota doesn't just stacks one person, it stacks everybody. Grand Arbiter doesn't just stop one person, it stops everybody. So it seems like when you're doing something that's a little bit more global, I suppose is what it seems like, outside of like Kinnan, because Kinnan's broken deck. I love that deck. Me and Nate love that deck entirely. But Yuriko, cool. You swing in, cool. Do 13 damage to everyone. That's not 13 damage.
Right. Yeah, you're 100% right.
That's 39 damage. That's insane. So on that kind of like, yeah, no one should be able to do that early on a random flip. Winota, once again, a really great stacks piece. It stops a lot of like removal pieces. If you can get out enough of those different pieces that say, cool, you got to pay one more, you got to pay one more, you're never getting to your 4 mana board wipe. And even when you do, you have ways to stop that with Boromir or Teferi's protection, that kind of thing. Like, cool, well, I just spent all my mana and I had to pay 8 for a board wipe for 4. And we notice, crashing in. I don't really know about like the EDH scene if there's a lot more spot removal. I feel like there's more spot removal than like cEDH. And then Grand Arbiter, once again, in cEDH, I've seen it played in a couple different decks. And it's just, I think it's the salt value, really. I think Grand Arbiter and Turgid and maybe Urza. I'm not totally sure which ones, but I know for sure Grand Arbiter and Turgid are like the most salty commanders. So they might not be like Turgid. They just make board states that are just ugh. Same with like Winota. So I think that's why those are really there, where they're global effects that are incredibly salty, and then Kitten is just broken. That's my thought process on what other like multicolor commanders or multicolor spells are global that make the game fun, not just for one opponent, but multiple opponents. I think is where you'll see more of these multicolor game changers kind of come in.
Yeah, I think that actually makes a lot of sense, because the more you kind of look at it, it makes a lot of sense. Because we're going to talk about Colorless here now, and there's actually a land on here that kind of is a global effect that everyone has to be under, so that actually makes a lot of sense. And Urza is typically associated with stacks and land disruption. That's actually a perfect point. So now we have Colorless. So on the Colorless list, we have Ancient Tomb, Chrome Mox, the One Ring, the Tabernacle at Pendrell Vale, Trinisphere, Grim Monolith, Lion's Eye Diamond, Mox Diamond, Mana Vault, and Glacial Chasm.
You probably know these cards better than I do. I don't even know what Glacial Chasm does. That's how much of like
okay, gotcha.
When we go over it, you school me. Hey, you guys, let me know that I don't know all the cards in every last deck and what Glacial Chasm does. No, couldn't tell you. Ancient Tomb is like an all-star, almost included in all cEDH decks. It really does ramp you up for your 2 mana signets. Easy. Chrome Box, easy. You know what I mean? The One Ring, banned in Modern, say less. Hey, I'm going to Greater Hoof Behemoth you. No, I played the One Ring last turn. Well, that was fun. Tabernacle of Pendrell Vale. This is the one that is not seen really heavily at all in cEDH. I definitely could see it in, like, maybe I could always see playing like Zuladoc, maybe, that'd be kind of fun. But like really unnecessary because it doesn't tap for mana. I want mana. I don't want like just an effect that sits there and I can only play one of those. And now I'm like, cool, Tabernacle, turn 1, Maddie, you know who you are and you did it and you let me win because of it. Thanks, bud. Trinisphere. You can't get out your early dorks, but like tier 1 to tier 3, I think you're playing like more 4s and 5s, more powerhouses in general. So like Trinisphere feels bad, but sometimes even in cEDH, if you play a late Trinisphere, you'll lock your opponents out and give someone else the game. Like, cool, now I can't interact with my Force of Will. So, like, I think
I think this also falls into the same category that we kind of just were mentioning, right? Same with Tabernacle at Pendrell Vale, right? It locks your opponents, right? Now all of a sudden their Soul Ring is now mana negative, essentially, right? So you're affecting everyone. So I think that's part of the reason why that's on this list.
Yep. Grim Monolith, once again, mana, Lion's Eye Diamond, goes with Underworld Breach, Mox Diamond, discard a land. I got a million of them, who cares? Mana Vault, and then I don't know what Glacial Chasm is. So it's just mana, the One Ring, Tabernacle, Trinisphere, and then whatever Glacial Chasm is. What is Glacial Chasm? I don't want to look it up. I want to be surprised. What is it?
You're good. Go ahead. Look up Glacial Chasm.
Okay.
And I'll kind of give my thoughts on some of this stuff. Obviously, Ancient Tomb we talked about. Perfect. I think the main reason that a lot of these are on there is fast mana is seen as a game changer, right? The quicker we can get into our game plan is very vital. And a lot of these cards are actually expensive too, like your Mox Diamonds and your Lion's Eye Diamonds, right? So this very quick accelerant stuff, I think is another reason why they're like, hey, these are game-changing cards because they can accelerate you from turn 1 to turn 4 like that. Yeah. So did you find out that Glacial Chasm is the one that prevents damage from everyone?
In cEDH, it doesn't matter. I just have a different win con that does outside of damage. But like with other people, like, cool, if you're playing, I don't know, some way to like recur lands, you're like, cool, I don't care. And most of your ways that you're winning are going to be by dealing damage, historically, at least from when I played EDH and when I've seen other people play in our local area. It's going to be a Greater Hoof. It's going to be that kind of effect where like, cool, overrun, kill, or just deal a bunch of damage. That doesn't stop the global effect where your opponents lose life, right? Yeah, prevent all damage,
No.
and they can't attack. So I mean,
If
technically, you do have your like black green kind of effects with aristocrats that would go around Glacial Chasm, and that's definitely very popular in EDH. I like that WinCon a lot.
Yeah, it's very strong, but again, it's a game changer because this one is a limiter, just like the previous ones that we kind of talked about when it comes to like Trinisphere and, you know, Tabernacle, and even in the One Ring to some regard, right? Because you are limiting now a person's way to beat you, right? If I'm the tokens deck and I make tokens very well, very efficient, and my only win con is combat damage, but you have a way to constantly recur Glacial Chasm, well, then what am I supposed to do, right? You've limited me to try to find another way, which I do not have, right? So I can understand that being a game changer for sure.
That
in a lot of ways.
Now that we've come up with this idea, Trouble in Pairs makes a lot more sense. Once again, it's restricting someone from how many people that can attack, how many cards that can play. It seems like a lot of the game changers, once again, all these global effects where it's Trouble in Pairs, like cool. And somewhat kind of like Staxy. Stacks and global effects. I mean, stacks are normally global effects. It seems like are a lot of the game changers on top of like tutors and general like amazing counter spells. It seems like what a lot of the game changers are. And a lot of mana. If you could produce a lot of mana, it's going to change the game. Like you said,
yes,
like
absolutely.
From turn 1 to turn 5, like that. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. And so the reason that we wanted to touch on these game changers first rather than the brackets themselves is because the brackets are kind of based on these game changers. If we just want to switch on over to the Commander brackets here for a second.
Yep.
So we now have a 1 through 5 bracket system. So obviously, as you could tell, cEDH is all the way on the right. 5, its own bracket, right? We'll talk about 4 here in a second. I'll get to it. Because obviously some of you guys might be looking at the screen and thinking to yourself, well, they both say the same thing, though. We'll talk about it. So, number 1, we have Exhibition, your ultra casual commander deck. So, the way that it was explained in the live stream, in case people didn't watch it, is that this is like your thematic decks, right? This is your, all of my cards have a chair in the art, you know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff, right? Like there's not a lot going on. It's just fun. You're just throwing stuff out there to throw stuff out there. Now, obviously, the other part of this now with the new bracket system is that there are some restrictions. So you cannot have mass land denial or extra turns. Now, obviously, we talked a little bit about the mass land denial. Actually, I don't know if we kind of touched on it, but I don't think there was actually a game changer card.
We might as well talk about it right now. Mass land denial. We're predominantly cEDH players, Nate. Like, how many lands do we normally play in a single game?
Gosh, typically 3 to 4. You know, occasionally a game goes long. We have a couple more than that, right?
Sure.
So, but what is mass land denial considered? Obviously, the first one that comes up, mass land destruction. Armageddon. Obliterate. It destroys everything, but it also destroys your lands, right? I'm sure there's some other ones that I'm not thinking, like World Fire. You know, there's tons of ones that just destroy your lands, right? The other part of that is mass land denial. Say you're up against a 5-color mana list, you are mono red, and you drop a Blood Moon. That is mass land denial, because you've now shut off 4 colors from one of your opponents, right? This is stuff that we see in cEDH, because obviously, if we can benefit from that and hinder you, we're going to do it. Other effects that kind of do this are like Winter Moon, Static Orb, things that allow you to only untap 1 land per turn or something along those lines. Or extra turns as part of this list. So none of your, like we talked about, expropriates. None of your Nexus of Fates. None of your... I can't think of another one. Karn's Temporal Sundering.
Sure.
Anyone that you could choose, right? Those cannot be in a bracket 1 deck. Second up, no 2-card infinite combos. Fair enough. This is very, very casual. Makes total sense. No game changer cards. So every single one of those cards that we talked about, whether it's thematic or not, and it's just for fun, does not belong in a bracket 1 deck. Sure. And then it says few tutors. Now, this was another piece that was talked on in the live stream a little bit, where when they talked about tutors, they talked about like quote unquote inefficient tutors, your diabolic tutors. I don't know, like final partings, right? Things that are like multiple mana, 5 or 6 mana, or you have to like meet some kind of criteria, right? Delirium, or You have to have a certain amount of cards in the graveyard, or everyone else has to have a certain amount of cards in their whatever it may be. And the other thing that was touched on was people asked about, well, what about my land ramp tutors? What about my rampant growths or my nature's lore or my 3 visits? Those are fine.
Perfect.
He talks about it in the article. Maybe we should probably link it down below.
Yeah.
But he talks about it in the article that he's not talking about land. He did bring up crop rotation, and he was like, maybe there's an argument for that to be in a higher bracket or something. But anyway, regardless.
That's bracket 1.
That is it. That is bracket 1.
Bracket
Nothing
2?
Crazy.
You want to go over bracket 2?
Right. So bracket 2, we have the average current pre-constructed deck. Now, this was another one that he talked on a little bit, that some of these decks that have come out recently, some of these pre-constructed decks, like, for instance, the Zula, I think it was Zula. Zula Doc wasn't the head commander, but it was maybe a different one. The Eldrazi precon, regardless. Sure. Yeah. That they've become a little bit more optimized, but for the most part, this spans most average pre-constructed decks. So again, no mass land denial. None of the blow up your lands, stop your lands. Now this one says no chaining extra turns. So you are allowed to have an extra turn here and there, but either A, you cannot sit there and have one after the other, or you can't find a way to recur that extra turn over and over and over and over again.
So no Tivit.
Right. So essentially, if you're playing Tivit, you can't do Time Sieve, right? That's not part of the deck, right? Because again, this also says no 2-card infinite combos, which essentially is kind of like Tivit and Time Sieve. Sure. Not all the time. Again, no game changers. No game changers in your average pre-constructed deck. You're not just winning from a Thassa's Oracle. You're not going to have them in there. And again, very few tutors. Same stuff we kind of talked about. Up next on the list. And this was what Gavin Verhey said during the live stream, that he believes that most people will probably sit in the 3 to 4 category, which makes complete sense. And I 100% agree. So 3 is upgraded. So this is taking your deck, saying, hey, here's $50. Go upgrade your precon, go put some better pieces in.
Great fun to do that, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So this one, again, just like the rest, no mass land denial, no chaining extra turns, but this is where things change up a little bit. Late game 2-card infinite combos. Now, some people in the live stream had questions. What does late game mean, right? What are we talking about when we say late game? But generalistically, he said around turn 7, 8, 9, somewhere along those lines. Okay. So people argued in the chat that it's like, oh, all games end at like turn 6 nowadays, and I don't think that's true. But again, maybe his play group was different. I'm not sure. But you are allowed to have 2-card infinite combos, but not like the super quick, efficient, I jam out all my Chrome Mox mana and I Thassa's Oracle Demonic, right? Sure. You can't do that. And then you are allowed 3 game changers. 3 game changers in your list. So you really like Smothering Tithe, you really like Rhystic Study drawn cards, and you want to have a little bit of fast mana, so you have a Chrome Mox.
Yeah.
Now you have the 3.
Rhystic Study, Force of Will, and Demonic Tutor. I mean, hard to beat that.
You got to pick. You got to pick. You want to get 3.
Or you said no 2-card combos in this one as well?
No early game 2-card combos.
So Thassa's
2-card combo.
So Thassa's Demonic is considered an early game comp.
That is considered early game, correct.
But yeah, there's no point of doing that turn 7, turn 8. So it really is, how do I get to that late game so that I can win? It seems like an efficient tutor. Right. One of the best tutors, Force of Will to make sure people don't win, and then a way to draw my cards seems, or even Trouble in Pairs, Rhystic Study. Man, there's so many different combinations, and I'm really excited to kind of hear what you guys want to talk about. Like, what are the 3 game changers that you really want? If you're in 3, man, can it be in your commander already as a game changer? You only get 2 other choices. Yeah,
you get 2 others in your list. Sorry, no Mox Diamond, no Chrome Mox for you in your Kinnan list on a 3. But it would be interesting to play as a kind of restriction, and shout out to, like, for instance, our boy Pub Stomper.
Yep.
Like, he kind of I would say he kind of embodies 3 in a way, right? I don't know how many game changers he really plays. I know that there's going to be a video up later where I talk about my Raga Draga list and how similar our lists actually were to each other, and I think he's got some tutors in there. And then as far as like late game 2-card combos, like, something that comes to mind like immediately is like your Sanguine Bond and Exquisite Blood. You know what I mean? Each one is 5 mana. They're both late game enchantments. You're probably casting one on one turn, having to wait until stick around, and then casting the other one on the next turn, and then be like, okay, well, the moment someone takes damage, this game's over. So, that's kind of what comes to mind for me.
I like it though. I really like bracket 3. I think this is a great like F&M kind
Yeah.
of like bracket. I would love to like cool, not cEDH. Let's do bracket 3 on Friday nights. Let's try it out. Let's all come together and figure this out. This sounds like so much fun, and it's like the top tier of the bottom tier, if you will, right? Like you could explore all different cards, and it's not like cool. I'm gonna have the dual lands, the fetch lands, all this fun jazz. I have to be restrictive. I would love to see tournaments and things like that for this. This sounds really inclusive, and it sounds like a brewer's paradise. It sounds like a lot of fun to me personally.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because that kind of restriction really it gets your mind going. You're like, oh shoot, do I just run all the good tutors? Oh, but then I miss out on my card draw from my Rhystic study, and oh, I missed out on the counter spell, and and all that. So I think it's very, very interesting. Now, however, I feel like this is where things get a little muddy, in my opinion, personally. So 4 is optimized. This is high power commander, go wild, do what you want to do. There are no restrictions other than the ban list. Now, obviously, all of you have probably read ahead and looked at this and said, well, cEDH also says no restrictions other than the ban list. When we made videos back in the day, when we first started, and we're still going to make some more casual to competitive content to help some people out, especially some newer people that have actually joined our Discord and started chatting with us. Great guys. Thank you for being there. This was kind of our goal. This was to help realize that, like, even with a bracket system coming from Wizards themselves, 4 and 5, there's no way they can even say, hey, this is what you can and can't do, right? So you could accidentally build a 5 while having a 4, because really the only thing that they're saying is high power with a very competitive and metagame focused mindset. That's the only thing that they're setting out differently from 5 versus 4. EDH Rec has already implemented this. Moxfield has already implemented this.
Yep.
That if you have a deck list, it will. For instance, I've obviously have a bunch of deck lists. They have more than 3 game changers in most of my pretty much every single one of my lists. So they automatically opted to a 4 and not a 5, even though I built these to be competitive mindset set. Right?
Yeah.
Now, the thing that was great about Moxfield, and I'm sure EDH Rec and all those other sites that are implementing this as well do it too, you cannot just manually set to say, oh, I'm a 3. Haha. Just kidding. Gotcha. You can't do that. Whereas 4 and 5, you can.
So you can upgrade your deck. You can't downgrade your deck.
You can upgrade to a 5, and then you can downgrade back to 4, but you can't downgrade any further if you have more than 3 game changers. It won't let you on Moxfield. It will automatically put you back up to 4, which is great.
So the restrictions are there. System. And like,
correct.
It is coming out just today. Like I don't know. I feel like they had some insider trading of some sort, because
they all were this stuff quick with it.
They're either like Wizards or they're hearing from the Wizards. I'm not sure, but either way, like, congrats, or not congrats, but like, thank you for doing that so quick. This is super exciting. Imagine like all the bracket systems, but there's no database that says, well, mine's a 3 and one, yours is a 4 and yours is a 2. Like, having this, like, this is what this is. I don't know. I kind of want to like make a level 1 deck. I think that's a challenge.
Yeah. So. Yeah, no. And I think that's the fun part about this bracket system, right? It's still a beta bracket system. So obviously, again, like we've talked about earlier, this is not set in stone. This is not 100% yet, but it does make for a fun time to actually be like, oh shoot, well maybe, okay, hold on. How do I do I do a 5-card infinite and then like no game changers? Okay, so I have to look at this list. What can I not make from, I can't touch anything on this list. All right, that's okay. I can do that.
Huh.
I think it's interesting.
Protein Hulk lines? That's what comes to me. Like, hey, it wasn't 2-card. It is late.
You're not wrong, right? I think that's what people are definitely going to be focusing on. For the most part, in the live stream and in the chats, like, people were pretty respectful of this system and obviously trying to get down to it. Gavin would say, like, hey, this is still sort of based on you guys. Like, this is still. And some people kind of like took offense to it for some reason, to be like, oh, well, then why is the bracket system there? I think what they have set up here is great. I do. Just as a general baseline, as a beta bracket system, I think this is a good baseline. I think 4 and 5 are a little muddy, but they've always kind of been a little muddy.
Sure.
So it's hard to say that this is wrong. Yeah. What are your kind of your and I've already obviously spoken a lot about this, and I kind of already have my thoughts. But what are your thoughts on mainly 4 and 5? But I'm curious about your thoughts on the whole bracket system.
So 4 and 5, yeah, it just seems I would like a distinction between the two, really, if that's all possible, like cEDH and high power. The worst thing is for someone to come and be like, oh, well, I'm playing a really powerful deck, and then play against cEDH decks and get ran over because because they have 4 game changers. They have 4 game changers, and guess what? Now they're not a 3. It's like, well, I like playing these cards, and I have 8 game changers. It's like, well, now you can't play with your friends because they're playing tier 3. So it's like, I would like there to be a distinct tier 3, a distinct tier 4, and a distinct tier 5 of like, maybe tier 4 is no dual lands. Maybe tier 4 is no. There just needs to be some kind of restriction that really does separate the two. Like, oh, hey, no, obviously you can have the game changers, but there needs to be some other restriction to it. And maybe even tier 1 through 3, like, hey, no fetch lands, no original dual lands. I don't really know. I would like to hear what you guys have to say. Like, what else is missing between all of these? And like, what, like, okay, cool, no dual lands in. See, even with like tier 1 and tier 2 and tier 3, you can still have original OG duels, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is,
yeah. I mean, they're not on the list. They're not on a game changing list.
That's crazy.
So that as far as this bracket system is concerned, yeah, you are allowed to have fetches. You're allowed to have OG duels. You're allowed to have the best lands you possibly can have, as long as they're not a game changing land like Tabernacle or Ancient Tomb.
Sure.
Or Sarah Sanctum.
Sure. Which is like,
or Gaius.
And once again, it's a beta. That's my initial thought. Is like I would like more restrictions. Honestly, that way you kind of like solidify like, okay, these tier 2 people that want to be left alone can be left alone in the game shop, and they're not have a 4 coming down like, oh well, I only have 4 game changers. Like, it's not a big deal, and run over people. The biggest thing is you want to play at the same elo. That's really what this is. You want to play at the same elo as everyone else. I'm okay to drop down to elo 2 and play and have a good time and meet some new people, and maybe introduce them to cEDH at some point in time. Like, hey, you like all these game changers? So do I. I got them all. You know? So it's kind of fun in that aspect where it's like it introduces me to a whole new bracket of individuals that I'm like, oh, I'm tier 3. I'm not just like, well, I'm just playing a really bad deck. Don't mind me, you know, or hey, Precon League is always, it seems like a really cool thing. And, you know, some of the precons are too busted, you know? So it's like, it's just super interesting. I really like it. And once again, it just sets different brackets, and it's solidified with Moxfield actually like saying, this is what this is. No one needs to guess. You put your thing in, you look at it, and you say, yep, I'm a tier 3. Like, cool. Now, can I adjust? Can I get to the very edge of that tier 3 and try to compete? And there can still be an arms race. Like Magda, my $100 Magda deck. Like, if I'm playing tier 2, like, it doesn't matter if I have Blood Moon. Guess what? Magda is like can play a lot of really good things. And like, okay, Ancient Tomb, okay, the One Ring, okay. Most of it's just the rocks, and then it doesn't hit anything else on Magda. It's like, cool, I don't play as many rocks. I'll swap with some lands. Cool. Now I have a Magda that can play all the busted stuff that I can play in tier 1 or in tier 5.
Blood Moon, that's mass land denial.
Sure, but I don't need.
I mean, yeah,
need Blood Moon in tier 2. Right? Are you playing all your dual lands? I mean, maybe.
Maybe you are.
But I'm just gonna turn for you. Well, can I even do that? You know, early game winners, like, well, turn 4. See that, and that's where it's still a beta. There's still a lot of time to figure out like what works and what doesn't work just through trial and error. And I really want to encourage all you guys to like get out there and like explore a different bracket. I think bracket 3 is just insanely good. I think it's really, let's break bracket 3 so that we can find out what to fix about it. You know what I mean? And obviously I don't want to be pub stomping all the time because I want people to enjoy their time, but like, cool, let's put some restrictions. Let's get some good feedback from the community and say, actually, whoa, this 100% has to be on the game changers. Or there might be a tier 1 game changer, a tier 2 game changer, a tier 3 game changer. And like between the different brackets, like you can have 4 of these, you can have 3 of these. And it's kind of interesting. Like at the beginning of the game, do you like reveal, okay, these are my 3 game changers, shuffle them into the deck? Like,
yeah. No, I like it. And the other thing that was talked about in the live stream was, because initially we were told about a point system. So this was what the point system ended up turning into, because I completely agree with Gavin. while watching the live stream, is basically what he said was that's just way too much. It's just way too complicated to figure out, a card's number rating and how you would put it in, and the number rating changes based on what else is in the deck, and it's too much. It's too much, which I completely agree with. But the thing that I did want to read over from his article, I think the main distinction that they're trying to understand between 4 and cEDH is that cEDH are kind of looked at as we're tournament grinders. A part of the bracket 4 says, the focus here is on bringing the best version of the deck you want to play, but not one built around a tournament metagame. It's about shuffling up your strong and fully optimized deck, whatever it may be, and seeing how it fares. For most commander players, these are the highest power commander decks you will interact with. And cEDH, which we've talked about this multiple times, and I still agree. The very first part of this says mindset is a key part of that description. Much of it is in how you approach the format and deck building. It's not just a no holds barred where you play your most powerful cards like in bracket 4. It requires careful planning. There's care paid into following and paying attention to a metagame and tournament structure, and no sacrifices are made in deck building as you try to be one to win the pod. Additionally, there is special care and attention paid to behavior and tableside negotiation that play into the tournament structure. So what I'm gleaning is that essentially when they, as Wizards sees it, we are the tournament people playing cEDH. We're not the people that are like me and I'm throwing a Rag and Drag list together and calling it cEDH. In their mind, that's technically not cEDH because I'm not playing an optimized, I want to win the tournament deck. And so I do understand their distinction to some degree. I don't know if I completely agree with it, because I think there is still a bit of a distinction there, but maybe it's just trying to work with them. Maybe it's just trying to make them, find our own way to sort of help, push that along. So that way we're not just saying words about it, right? We're actually like trying to give back to him and be like, oh, I think, maybe OG duels aren't allowed in tier 4 and, things along those lines to try to help distinguish this a little bit, because I wouldn't call cEDH players immediate tournament grinders, but based on this, that's kind of what I'm thinking that they're seeing us as, which I don't necessarily agree with, but I did think it was important to kind of read it over to help people distinguish a little bit.
Let us know what you guys think about our opinions. Let us know why we're wrong. Let us know why we're right, what you agree with, what differentiation. We're a community and we're really gonna be able to have a better understanding of maybe I missed a word. Actually no, it says this, Chris and Nate. You got that
Right.
You got that entirely wrong, or this is my thought process on it and I'm actually not excited for it, and I want to hear why you're not excited about it based on what's here, not necessarily what you think could come, but was actually shown here. Oh, everything's good unbanned. That's not in the article, right? Everything's gonna get banned. Once again, not in the article. I'm not about fear mongering. I'm about just information. I'm excited for as a cEDH player for a bracket 3 community, because we didn't all start tournament grinding. We didn't all start there. We started probably at a 2, honestly. And there's a succession rate. There's a way to get from one spot to another, or to stay in 3. That's perfectly fine. And most people are going to play that all day long. And it seems like a really fun bracket, honestly.
I think I touched on it earlier. I'll touch on it again just in case. But they, like I said, they did talk about potential unbans when it came to the April live stream to talk over this bracket system again to make sure it's maybe more set in stone. And essentially, they basically said that if there are unbans, those unbans will essentially move from the unban list to the game changer list. Not all of them, but that's kind of what their thought process was on it, which I think makes a lot of sense. But yeah, just like what Chris said, let us know what your thoughts are. You could join the Discord. Link is in the description below for that. And you could come talk to us about it. These are obviously our real thoughts on it. Obviously, Maddie's not here with us. You obviously can get his thoughts on it as well. And as a lot of other people in our community right now, I thank you guys again. I said it before. I'll say it again. Appreciate you guys being there. But I think that covers everything that we want to talk about. And like I said, this is what we have to go on. These are the facts. These are the written out things that we have. This was not based on speculation or guesses or estimates. This is what we have. And so I say we just work with it the best we can and have fun with it the best way that we can.
We are Turning Point Meta, and we'll catch you out next time.
See you guys.